All right. Aha. And 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another episode of the Politipop Podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I am your co-host, Mike Booch, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ty.
Hey, what's up?
What is up is that if you are listening to us on your podcatcher of choice, please make sure that you give us a 5-star rating and reviews. That way it helps us out. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert bell so that way you get notified every week when we're posting new videos and exclusive content such as outtakes, which are only available on YouTube. And speaking of exclusive stuff, Ty, do you know what I wanted to talk about real quick?
I have a feeling it might be our Patreon.
Dude, that is a great feeling you have. Indeed, it is about the Patreon. It is officially live, everybody. That's right.
Oh my gosh.
Can give us money. Please act like you've been there before. All right, everybody, calm down. But yes, you can give us money for bonus content and cool peeks behind the scenes and the opportunity to interact with us directly. And I'll you know what? Let me tell you a little bit about the tiers real quick. There's going to be 3 tiers. The first tier here is the proletariat and the working class, the people. $3 a month gets you early access to our episodes. It gets you access to the social media drama that I get into with all of my liberal friends on Facebook.
Nice.
And assholes on Twitter. And of course, in this tier, fans get to request the content they want to hear. That's right. You can recommend and vote on what movies, shows, comic books, whatever it is you want us to review next, and we will be using Patreon to decide what our episodes will end up being. We'll also have discussion boards, so if you want kind of a more exclusive place to chat with us and the other Politipop heads, you can do that through the Patreon. And of course, we're also going to have shout outs. Thank you to the people who are supporting us. So you'll be getting shouted out on the episodes. And, if there's not a lot of you, then you'll probably all get your name shouted out at some point on the podcast. Unless you don't want us to let us know. Next is the $6 tier. It's the Comrade tier, with which you get everything in the proletariat tier, plus mini reviews, because I'm always watching stuff and having thoughts on it, so I'll be recording those. You can get your own Politiprofile pic, a nice simplified piece of art of your face that I will draw for you to use on whatever social media you'd like. Also, shout-outs with promotion. So let's say you're one of our fans, but you also have an Etsy shop, or maybe you have your own podcast or something. We will be promoting whatever projects you're working on. And the third tier is the Resistor tier. That's right. At $9 a month, you will get access to monthly watch-alongs. These watch-alongs will be you being able to watch movies in real time through Zoom or Skype or Discord or Twitch. We'll work it out with myself and or Tyler or just myself. We'll figure it out, but we're going to make it work. Sorry I called you Tyler. Also, the Politipop Book Club. That's right. I'm going to be uploading audio booches, which are my version of audiobooks, to the Patreon. We already have the introduction that I did myself and Chapter 1 to How to Survive Anything, Anywhere, a handbook of survival skills for every scenario and environment. I'll be uploading a chapter each week that I am recording and throwing in my own ridiculous commentary. It's kind of like Audible, but less official and maybe a little more fun. I don't know. And, of course, we have bonus episodes, too. So if Ty and I are doing reviews of other things, or maybe housekeeping episodes that it might be just us riffing or whatever, or just us talking, and we don't want to put it out as an official episode, we'll throw it onto the Patreon. So that's right. Tell all your friends, tell your parents, tell your wives.
It's the perfect Christmas gift, just in time for the holidays.
It really, really is, to them and to us. Now, getting into the episode, today we are reviewing one of mine and my wife's favorite shows. This is the show that IndieWire.com called a slow, brutal disaster. The show Entertainment Weekly called soapy trash that badly wants to be taken seriously. And I have forced my brother into watching it, my co-host into watching it. That's right. We are going to be reviewing the Paramount Network's show Yellowstone. What did you think of what you saw, Ty?
It's interesting. I wouldn't say it's totally grabbed me as one of the best shows I've ever seen, But I'm interested to see what happens.
It's like a solid popcorn flick as a show. And the more that you learn about the creator, the more it all starts to make sense. Do you know who Taylor Sheridan is?
Just what I saw from the videos you sent me. Otherwise, I do not.
Okay, so Taylor Sheridan, turns out that he actually grew up in Texas and in I want to say it was North Wyoming is where he was raised. He was, so he spent a lot of time on reservations, and he eventually got into film. He did some acting in the 90s, but primarily writing and directing is his passion. So he did Hell or High Water.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Starting to make sense, right? He did Sicario.
Another great movie.
And he did Wind River, which is the whole movie is about an MMIW case. For the uninitiated, it's murdered and missing Indigenous women. We're going to be using that a lot during this episode, and we're going to be talking about what it means a little bit later on when we get into the native specific stuff about Yellowstone. That being said, trigger warning, because we don't do the alarm for that one. We do it for the spoiler alert, not for trigger warnings. Those are serious things. Anyway, we're going to be doing a trigger warning for violence against women, for sexual assault. And you know what? While we're at it, why don't I get it out of the way? I know I'm talking about Taylor Sheridan, but Ty, do you hear that?
Oh my God, is that what I think it is?
It's not a tornado warning, which we got last night.
That's true, we did. I think it's a spoiler alert.
That's damn right, Ty. It is a spoiler alert. This is your official spoiler warning. So for those of you who have not watched Yellowstone and actually are interested in it, for some reason years after the first season's come out, I feel like you were either on it or you weren't. You're not gonna get into it later unless.
It's
you're
on the Paramount
watch
network,
it
so I feel like not a lot of people are seeing it. But
yeah, I mean it's that and Bar Rescue. That's what they got going on. But yeah, so for those of you who don't want spoilers, some of them detailed, some of them a little bit more nebulous, for Yellowstone, please watch the show before moving forward. But yeah, so Wind River is a movie starring Jeremy Renner and Caitlin Olsen that the whole plot centers around a reservation in Wyoming, in which it's called the Wind River Reservation, and there's a case of a missing Indigenous woman, and Jeremy Renner is one of the people who has to work on the case along with Caitlin Olsen. So,
oh man, maybe we should have reviewed that.
Right, we should have just reviewed that instead of watching hours of scattered episodes of a TV series. But yeah, so Taylor Sheridan, I think it goes without saying that he does, while he is definitely a white dude, he has used his platform to talk about Native issues and Indigenous issues because it is something that's close to him. He has spent time on reservations. He is very close with these people. So I would just want to give him kudos. It seems like he's in that kind of Michael Bay, Zack Snyder camp, but definitely the most socially aware of them all. I think. Well, he said in an interview, and I'll put a bunch of interviews in the show notes. He said I don't want movies that are going to preach at me. Nobody wants to go to those. He's like, I like to make action movies, but I want to make action movies that have a message, that do talk about real issues. That way, people learn about it, because a lot of social justice starts with the arts.
Yeah, I was going to say there's way more depth to his films than a Michael Bay film. Way more.
Okay, that is fair. He does like to do the action stuff a lot. And,
there's definitely action for sure.
Yeah. And if you do watch, when you do watch more of the show, hopefully you'll realize that, he takes a lot of opportunities, stuff he might have not been able to do in movies. He's like, let's fucking put it in here. Let's, because this whole ranch is, full of not just ranchers, but they're also marksmen and soldiers and criminal. They can do everything,
They're the best.
But another thing I noted about Taylor Sheridan is that after the allegations came out against Harvey Weinstein, of the Weinstein Company, which helped produce Wind River, Taylor Sheridan cut ties with the Weinstein Company and gave all of his royalties to the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center.
That's amazing.
Right? And they specifically make it a point to mention in one of the episodes of Yellowstone that they do talk about the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center at the end of the episode. Like, so they had that up there. So I thought that was really cool. But before we talk about the episodes, Ty, how about you give us the plot to them?
Yellowstone. A ranching family in Montana faces off against others encroaching on their land. Short and sweet.
The way that I would describe this, and I described it to you, is I would say it's kind of like a modern Western Game of Thrones, or like a modern Western Sopranos, because
Definitely.
it's full of very complicated characters. It's got action, it's got politics, it's got love, it's got death. It's got a little bit of everything, and it also has a bit of culture in it too. Not just talking about the Native American stuff, but I know you said you're not specifically into like the ranching. Being that my wife has gotten me a little bit more into like country culture and like riding horses and going to ranches and stuff. Like it is something that does interest me to an extent. You notice the past couple of years I started walking around with a Carhartt vest.
Yeah. I guess it's like the vegan part of me. It's just like not into the cattle stuff, but I get it.
Oh yeah, that's 100% fair. Yeah, because they do like a lot. It's not always riding horses. It's they're raising cattle to be used as meat and shit. Like
or the bull riding, or like roping up horses. So that stuff I'm like, but you know what? You're not even really supposed to like these characters anyway, so it's fine. I feel like they're not very good people right off the bat. You kind of realize that.
Yeah, and like, obviously with the animal stuff, but animal stuff aside, like everybody in this show is, or almost everybody I should say, is a villain in some way, shape, or form. And, there's only one, I'd say like 100% innocent person in the show.
That Monica?
And it's...
Or Tate?
I was actually going to say Tate.
Okay.
Who's Monica and Casey's son. But I guess real quick, I just want to talk about a few of the characters, and just so the listeners have an idea of who we're talking about.
Right.
How much of the show did you see again?
I've seen 4 full episodes and a bunch of clips and scenes.
Okay, cool. Because a big thing I was nervous about was, like, I suggested this and I was like, dude, it does so much for Native people and talks so much about this story. And then as I'm rewatching it, I'm like, wow, I was like, this is like a very white-centric show. Like, it centers on, like, I mean, what show isn't in the United States?
Yeah.
But, like, the narrative is really around the white people, and, like, the Native stuff is kind of secondary. But I am glad that in you, like, watching a couple more episodes, you were able to see that there is more Native-centric stuff. And
they bring it up a lot, you know what I mean? So, like, you're right, that definitely focuses on, this white family, but... the Native stuff is frequently talked about. They're shown on the reservation a lot, so it is important to the overall story.
Yeah, the main family owns the Yellowstone Ranch. They're the Dutton family. Kevin Costner plays the lead patriarch, John Dutton. And he is, if you've ever watched Game of Thrones, he's the Tywin Lannister of the family. He knows where all the bodies are buried, figuratively and literally. He also is the one who gives all the orders, whatever they may be. And then, of course, you have the black sheep of the family, who is his son Jaime Dutton, who I relate to Tyrion. He is definitely the smartest out of the whole group, but his intellect is rivaled by his sister Beth, who is just fucking ruthless as all get out. And we'll talk about her. Yep, she's the Cersei Lannister. We'll talk about her as it goes along, and then complicated protagonist of the family that gets along with all of his siblings, not as well as Jaime does with his sister though. Is Casey, and Casey is he starts off as such an interesting character because he doesn't live on the ranch with his family. He hasn't seen his family in a little bit. It's kind of a touch and go situation with them.
Yeah.
Really, he's been living on the Broken Rock Reservation. Broken Rock is a made up tribe and reservation, by the way. It's fictional, created just for the show, which I think was actually a pretty good call, because while a lot of this stuff is factual in that it's talking about actual events that happen all around in different reservations. Like I think this is kind of like the reservation that's made to represent a little bit of every reservation, but also while creating a fictional tribe, like, or creating a fictional reservation, excuse me, you don't have to like adhere to specific things because the show does try to be realistic in a lot of regards.
It gives them more creative freedom.
Yeah. But so yeah, you have Casey. Casey is kind of a troubled soul because, you know, we'll find out later on why he and his family don't really talk. He is a veteran, which is a big part of his character that he clearly, I don't know if he necessarily suffers from PTSD, but he does have a lot of regrets about the things he had to do overseas. He doesn't like to talk about it.
But he certainly doesn't suffer from the ability to kill. Because
no.
he is killing left and right in a few episodes that I've seen.
He's too good at it. He is like every Jason Statham character, like rolled into one.
He's like, God damn it.
I don't want to do this.
Here we go, kill it again.
Yeah, he's like Crumbopulous Michael from Rick and Morty. Here I go killing again.
Yep.
I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. And there was an older brother, Lee, who dies at the end of the first episode, which
that surprised me.
Yeah. I completely forgot about. I thought he was in at least 2 episodes. I didn't know what happened that early on.
Man, imagine getting cast for that role. You know, you're like, ooh, you're part of the Dutton family. You're in 1 episode. Fuck.
I'm playing Kevin Costner's son. I'm fucking set. You know, I'm set. And of course, there's also Rip, who is he's kind of like the enforcer. He's the guy who's like the head rancher on the ranch. He's John Dutton's right hand man. And did they give you his origin story yet, or no?
No, I just saw him beat up some guys for beating up Jimmy, who has, I guess, the brand, right? Because only certain people are branded on the ranch, and the rest are just hired help.
Branding is obviously a practice that's used on cattle and livestock, so that way you mark them as your property. But the Duttons have a family tradition where they take it a step further. There are men and women on this ranch who are sworn to Yellowstone. Like, this is what they will live for and what they're going to die for. And they get branded with the Yellowstone brand. For example, in the first episode, we see Jimmy, he's a 2-time loser. He's a thief. He's into drugs. He's just gotten out of prison and he's getting set to go back in. Rip, who's like the most badass motherfucker of Yellowstone ranch, he comes to Jimmy and brands him and makes him part of the Yellowstone family. And like you said, there is an episode where some dude who's just kind of a hired hand passing through, he starts shit with Jimmy, and Rip doesn't stand for that. Like, he represents all of the ranchers. So if you're going to fight anyone, you're going to fight him. Even if you're another like Yellowstone guy trying to fight another Yellowstone guy, like, Rip won't have it. Like, he doesn't want that kind of tension.
I want to like Rip, but he seems a little too macho sometimes for me.
You know what? He's the kind of guy who grows on you, and you'll see why. Like, I don't know exactly if this is a good representation of it, but the show not only plays out like Game of Thrones, but it also simultaneously plays out like an anime. And like, Rip's whole like history is very much the whole like, you know, I could have saved the person I loved if I was stronger. And so like now he'll never, I kid you not. And so now, like, as something happened to him as a kid, you know, and as an adult, he's like the hardest motherfucker there ever was. And
he'll be the very best, like no one ever was.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some checking in later episodes that have nothing to do with Yellowstone, just to be like, so what do you think? We'll do, you know what? We'll make that bonus episodes for the Patreon. Checking in with Yellowstone. Ty, what did you think of this one? But yeah, so let's talk about how he and a lot of the men in this show are forced to be macho. There's certain representations of masculinity in it that I want to talk about just for a bit because, you know, it is an important part of the show, but we are really here for the native stuff. I do think that this show offers a critique of that same toxic masculinity.
Okay.
Have you seen anything in the episodes yet that suggests that, or no?
Not really. I mean, like Jamie, I know Beth is always making fun of him for possibly being gay and not being manly enough. And then when he you know, she's pushing him and he finally, like, he decks her in the face and she's like, oh, a real man would have walked away, you know? So I've seen a lot of them kind of making fun of him for trying to pursue a different path than this, like, macho ranching. stuff. But I will say, like, with Casey, I feel like he's a little more emotional. You know, he likes to spend time with his son, and he's very loving towards his wife. I don't know if him and Monica are married or not, but so in that regard, I think that's probably one of the reasons I like him the most, is because he shows the most affection, and seems to, you know, not just be this tough guy all the time.
Yeah, even Casey's older brother Lee in this episode, like, he exhibits a lot of you know, toxic traits, such as he's ready to go to violence as the first resort if need be. And it's interesting how that guy's kind of mirrored with Casey's brother-in-law, who is you know, he's also a veteran, but he lives on the reservation. And, you know, like, the first episode kicks off with this, you know, this issue in which cattle have wandered onto the reservation. So the natives are like, okay, this is our land. You can't come here and get that cattle. And it becomes this big issue because the ranchers are like, listen, that's our cattle. It has our brand, so it's ours. And they're like, well, it's on our land. And he's like, the cattle don't know the difference between your land and our land. And Chairman Rainwater, we'll talk about him in a bit too. He's like, well, neither did we until the government showed us. Like, you know, that was. They're
using their own tricks against them, because there was barbed wire on those fences, they said, but it was removed. So, you know, they knew what they were doing to get the cattle to wander over. But again, yeah, it kind of brings up a valid argument there. It's like, you know, you're claiming that we're stealing from you when you stole all of this from us, right? Like, this is native land. These, you know, this should belong to that tribe. But instead, you know, someone like the Dutton family now owns most of the property. So is that really the fair thing? So that was definitely a good argument they brought up.
You'll notice that there's also a theme as the season goes on. Like, you were introduced to Jenkins, who's one of the real estate guys, that, like, him and John and so many other characters they bring into the show, like, they really make sure that the villains are old white men. And in a couple of cases, the villains are young white men. But you'll find that the show actually has just like this constant theme of all of the older men are actually the ones who are afraid. They're afraid of losing their land. They're afraid of losing their way of life. They're afraid of the new moving in on the old and changing things for them. And it actually turns out to be the women who are the ones with the most agency in the show. Like, you mentioned Beth, who is like, she doesn't take shit from anybody, and she does give Jamie a lot of shit. She's constantly trying to emasculate him and start shit with him, and you really do feel bad for Jamie for a lot of the show. You do find out, and I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but you do find out in the third season why she hates him so much.
I mean, I know that she has some issues, you know, they blame her for her mother's death, and her mother was very hard on her. I've seen a little bit of that already. So she has some guilt and some things that have made her, I guess, toughen up since she was a child.
Yeah, to say the least. And she keeps showing everybody how tough she is as an adult as well. She's definitely, I'd say, the best acted character in the show. But also, I'm talking about this example of, you know, the examples of masculinity in the show. You know, there is also kind of this theme of police brutality that's peppered throughout, which is interesting because while Taylor Sheridan does seem to paint a very woke story, also a lot of it is like big time bootlicker stuff. Like, he is totally into the idea of like, all right, like, you know, the badass guys are the ones who are, you know, like the military flak jacket wearing dudes with AR-15s, like, you know, like those are the most badass guys. The only way to get shit done is going to be to do like a full on assault, which once again, they get ranchers to do because these guys are like, they're literally the ride or dies when it comes to the Yellowstone ranch. So in the first couple episodes, there's a case of a MMIW in which you actually saw it more recently than me. So what, Casey finds this van or what?
Yeah, so I think he's driving home with his son. They're kind of like, you know, just chatting, and he sees this van pulled over kind of on the side of the road, and he notices immediately that it sticks out. So he kind of stops the truck. He, you know, is a little suspicious. His son's like, you know, what's wrong? And he's like, I just got to check something. But he takes a gun out of the glove compartment, and he gets out of the truck, and, you know, he peeks in and he sees a native girl, all tied up. And it winds up turning out that these two white men were trying to kidnap her, and he does proceed to kill them. You know, he rescues her. It's a little bit of the white savior thing, but you know, it's done in a way that does highlight a real problem. So again, he does save her, brings her back to her parents' house, and she's upset, she's angry, she's been obviously beaten. Her father claims that she was not raped, otherwise, there would be no mercy for anyone. They wound up having to go back, burn the bodies, and bury them so that no one knows, because I think the father says, when one of us goes missing or dies, nobody cares. But if one of them goes missing or dies, everyone will. So that, nobody can find these two white men's bodies.
A little bit later, Chairman Rainwater and the limited police resources he has, they're interrogating Casey about what happened. And it's this isn't necessarily a case of like overreach, but they do have a moment in which Casey is saved by his brother Jamie, who comes in, and Jamie is a lawyer. He's like the only one of the Dutton kids who like doesn't work like directly with the ranch. He was sent to Harvard at a young age by his father to become something else that could help him defend the ranch.
The legal aspect
legacy
of it, right? And because I think the whole idea is that the Duttons want to control everybody and everything. So if they have their hands kind of in the pockets of every single area of government, of the local authorities, everything they can, then nobody can take their land from them. So I believe that Jamie wants to run for attorney general so that he has even more power. And it's partly for him and partly for the ranch, but yeah. So he uses Jamie to kind of for political reasons and to try and capture as much power as they can.
And much like Jaime Lannister and Tyrion Lannister, Casey is the only one who's nice to his younger brother. They have a couple good moments in the show as well. But yeah, basically his brother comes, his lawyer brother Jamie comes, gets him out of everything. The cop says he says, "I'm not afraid of lawyers," and Rainwater's like, "You should be. They're the only ones who know how to break the law." But there later on, Casey does, I believe he becomes livestock commissioner, I think in season 1. And sorry, like I said, there were going to be spoilers, but this isn't like, anything you would care about, like character related. But yeah, Casey actually becomes livestock commissioner. And there's a case with stolen cattle in which he does end up having to shoot someone, and he kills them, of course. Yep. And he kills them, and he feels terrible about it. He doesn't tell his wife about it. But when he gets back to his office, like all of these ranch owners are there shaking his hand, and they're like, you did the right thing. Thanks for sticking up for us. We know you have our vote, blah, blah, blah. Like it became this political thing. And, Casey just felt like he was doing his job, and he didn't even want to do that. Like he didn't want to kill this guy, but he was shot at first, and, he had to do his thing. There's also another moment where he actually is first put into the livestock commission agency by his father. So you can kind of guess that while they do have their tensions, he does end up getting more involved with his own family.
Yeah.
But one of the first cases they have to go on is the case of somebody is mutilating their own animals and making it look like wolves did it, so that way they get insurance payouts. And once Casey finds this out, like he's with one other livestock agent, and there's a case where this agent pulls his gun on like a 15-year-old kid who's trying to save his father from going to prison or whatever. So they both have guns on each other, and Casey is the one who's trying to talk them down.
Interesting.
And Casey's the one trying to talk him down. He's like, listen, your father's going to get a fine. He's going to get some community service, and he's going to pick up trash on weekends. Like, please, is this really worth it? And the kid is considering it, and while he's considering it, the other livestock agent, who in season 3 actually kills 2 other people,
wow.
2 other suspects. Yeah, and he keeps getting out. He's like the dunce of it, though. Like, he's not like the badass. He just is an idiot. But yeah, he kills 2 other people in the 3rd season, and Jamie has to be the one to get him out of it. So we're talking about, like the justice system, blue wall of silence, stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, so he takes his gun out and shoots this kid right in front of his father. It's a terrible situation, and it sucks because they did, like, John Dutton basically owns the police, and they did ask for reinforcements, and they were never sent, and it was just a really fucked up case. So like there is a lot of talk in this show about overreach regarding the justice system. And it does basically all the most dangerous people who enter into the show at some point end up being women, educated, younger, unafraid women who are ready to speak truth to power. There's actually a Native woman who comes in later, and she's a lot like Beth, and she's the one who is consulting with Chairman Rainwater. Just that being said, I'll talk about land and how that kind of relates to masculinity, and that'll go into the Native stuff. A big theme of this entire show, just like you mentioned in the plot, is land. John Dutton is obsessed with it. Chairman Rainwater is obsessed with buying it back because it was his people's in the first place. And then there's a bunch of other real estate moguls who come in and out of the seasons as the big bads of each season, who are trying to take that land from John Dutton. And there's no irony lost in that this was stolen land in the first place. And Rainwater brings it up every single chance he can. At one point, I think in the beginning, in the season 3 premiere, Monica's talking to John, and she's like, "Looks like you're the Indian now," and she just walks away, because he has to fight for his land. And I can say from personal experience, like when I go up to the country to my father-in-law's land, like he would meet up with a couple of neighbors, and like they were talking, and all they could talk about was property. That was like the biggest thing. It's like, "Oh, I don't want anyone on my property." Like, "Oh, my property there." Like, "Oh, is that your property?" "No, it's my property." So like, just going along with the narrative today, it shows that like property is really what's most important to capitalists, as specifically to white capitalist men. Like it's always been about the land. It's always been about the property. When protests happen and property gets destroyed, they care more about that than they care about why the protest happened, which is usually an individual of color being shot. And no justice happening on the side of law enforcement.
So let's talk a little bit about Thomas Rainwater.
Yes, please do.
He wasn't born on a reservation, which I thought was interesting, and yet he's kind of in charge of the whole thing, right? I know he's trying to strengthen, the natives' kind of power. He wants to give them more resources and more ownership, and I think he's trying to form a bigger police force there, and he's constantly at arms with the Duttons. He's kind of like Marjorie Terrell to. You're making going Game of Thrones references because I know Game of Thrones.
See? Let's keep it going. I'm fine with it.
And he's constantly playing mind games, right, with Kevin Costner's character John Dutton. It seems like, and I'm not sure if he's a good man or not. In the first episode, Casey actually murders Monica's brother, right? That was who he killed.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
There is the whole land dispute, which we could talk about a little more after we talk about Rainwater. But
so Rainwater he's constantly plotting, right? Like I think he knows right from the start that it's probably Casey who did the murder, and he wants to get him, but not quite like that. And they have a couple of interactions which I thought were interesting. There's a part where there's like a meth lab that explodes, and of course Casey's driving by. He stops, finds this guy burning to death.
Wrong place, wrong time.
And the guy's like, "Kill me!" So he's like, "All right." He gets his gun and he kills him. So Rainwater actually covers for him, right? And he has him switch gun parts with one of the officers, so that it looks like the cop's the one that executed the guy and put him out of his misery.
He changes out the barrel, and and that's actually what's used to get Casey off the hook for murdering the 2 guys who were kidnapping women on the res.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. They wound up he wound up come with me. We got to purify ourselves, and they go and they do I don't know if it's like a smoke bath or something like that, but. They're having this conversation, and Rainwater talks about Casey's son. And he says, did he look like you when he was born? And Casey says, "Yeah, he doesn't look like me anymore, but when he was born, he did." And he goes, "Yeah, every boy looks like every child, boy or girl, looks like their father when they're first born, and that's nature's way of showing the father that it's their child, so they don't think it's someone else's and they kill it." And then he says, men are not good, right? He says, no men are good. He says, but some of us try real hard to be. And I thought that was an interesting way, like, of him acknowledging that he probably hasn't always done the right thing, and he's probably not always been a good man, but maybe his intentions are good, and he's trying to help the people of this reservation that have been so forgotten about and so pushed to the side and mistreated and abused. And he's finally someone who's educated and he's powerful and he's coming in here and he's trying to help them and strengthen them.
There's a Salt Lake Tribune interview where Gil Birmingham, who is the actor who plays Thomas Rainwater, he says it was such a beautiful opportunity to actually play a contemporary representation of a Native American, because you rarely ever see that, especially one that has some kind of leverage and is a powerful player in the game. Rainwater has a Harvard education, and his resume includes a successful stint on Wall Street before he became the tribe's chairman. Rainwater hasn't been able to wrest the land from the Duttons yet, but he has made life very uncomfortable for them at times. And that goes to exactly what you said, that like he is a powerful dude, and he, at his core, he may be trying to do the right thing, but he's going to do a lot of wrong things to get there. And they do bring that up in the first episode, that he has become he has become just like the white men, and now he's going to fight the way they fight, because he, like you said, he was raised not knowing that he was a native, and that's actually Gil Birmingham's actual story.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure with the lawyer part, but but he was raised to believe that he was Mexican.
Interesting.
And then found out later on that he was actually native. And it's awesome just to see this character, because you do want to root for him, but he is doing just the same crooked stuff that all of the other characters are doing too.
Yeah, but you know what? I guess it's easier to root for him because he is trying to help people that are helpless in a way. When you compare the people on the res compared to the Duttons, there's a very difference in power, in lifestyle, and you see like constant struggling. Like I think in episode 3 or 4, there's a Native woman who winds up killing herself, and it's because she had no food, and she had 3 kids. She couldn't afford food. She couldn't afford to care for her kids, and she had a sister, I think, that lived in Seattle, but they had a huge fight about leaving the reservation. So the only way to get her kids a better life was to kill herself, so the sister would come and take them. And it was so heartbreaking. It was, I think Monica calls it, it wasn't a suicide, it was a sacrifice, because that's the life they have to lead, where they're constantly struggling. Life on the res is not easy, and it's not fair.
Yeah, that's something that Sheridan also put into Wind River, that there's a line that says, on the reservation, you either survive or you surrender. Like, that's it. And I do think there is a really good narrative of speaking about like the limited resources that are available on the reservation. And I really wish we had time to get into everything, but it is all in the show notes and sources. So please check it out there, because I was listening to the Red Nation podcast recently, and there's an entire episode that talks about MMIW, and they do talk about how like the sexual violence upon Native women stems from the colonization and the oppression that kickstarted this country, that this country was built on, and how I didn't even think about this, but the very act of like procreating with Native women was to create workers. Like, that's what it was all about. Of course, that's what a capitalist would do. Like, they'd rate them, they'd make more workers. They're just another resource to you. Everything is. They always talk about Robert Pickton, and I want to read a little bit about him from an article. Robert Pickton brought attention to a lot of cases regarding missing individuals. The article starts with, the man who headed up the 2012 inquiry into the Robert Pickton police investigation says he learned that law enforcement would treat missing persons cases, particularly those involving marginalized communities, as an afterthought. And their response invariably would be, well, we don't have time to look for hookers. Your daughter is a drug addict. What do you expect us to do? And furthermore, she can go missing if she wants, and we can't stop her. There's no evidence of foul play. So this is evidence from the guy who investigated the case. But an interesting thing about Robert Pickton was that Pickton was suspected of targeting sex workers and other vulnerable women on Vancouver's downtown east side. Many of his victims were Indigenous women, some dealing with addictions or mental health issues. Once again, like I said last episode, oh, I know I didn't say it during the Pocahontas episode. We were talking about alcoholism. We could talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women if we ever covered Pocahontas too, because that's what they did to her.
Yeah. I have some stats here from the Attorney General Office of South Dakota, and it's pretty alarming, honestly. So, 85% of the missing children in South Dakota are Indigenous. 85%, and only 16% of the state's population is Indigenous people under 19. So, if you look at that stat and think about 85% of the missing children, and it's only 16%, that only makes up 16% of the population total. It's insane. People aren't talking about it. It doesn't really make the news. Nobody really helps them find these children. No one seems to really care, and it happens, probably more often than anyone would imagine. And yet, how often do you hear anyone talking about this? And this is just one example, one state, but it's terrifying. It's horrible. Nobody's helping find these children.
Yeah, and a big reason for that involves jurisdiction, and that's another issue. I have an article from The Atlantic, once again, which we'll link to. It says, in 2011, the U.S. Justice Department did not prosecute 65% of rape cases reported on reservations. According to department records, 1 in 3 Native women are raped during their lifetimes, 2.5 times the likelihood for an average American woman, and in 86% of the cases, the assailant is non-Indian. And it also points to a Supreme Court case from 1978, Oliphant v. Suquamish. Basically, it stripped tribes of the right to arrest and prosecute non-Indians who commit crimes on Indian land. So that means that white people can come, and I have another article, I believe also from The Atlantic, that talks about it. Oh, actually, I think this is the same one, excuse me. But it says, the headline is basically you can get away with whatever you want on Indian reservations. And I was offended just reading the headline. I was like, what the fuck are they talking about? Are they saying oh, these guys are savages, blah, blah, blah? But no, they're literally saying that if you're white, you can go onto an Indian reservation, commit a crime, and legally they cannot prosecute you. If you commit a crime, if you commit a crime against another white person on the reservation, another non-reservation, civilian, then they cannot charge you on the reservation. And even then, if you do go through their courts, they're only able to give you 3 years if they are able to charge you with anything, a maximum of 3 years. And the biggest threat that they can really send your way is a traffic ticket.
It's just how are you supposed to police your own land? They're like, this is your land, take care of it. But then when you try to protect the people on it, they tell you can't do it. It's illegal, right? So it's just, what's the point? You can't do anything.
Well, Rainwater says in a later episode that the reservations were supposed to be temporary, that they were supposed to learn how to assimilate, how to be white, how to be Americans and move into cities, and then the land would also be sold just like the rest of it. But he says they're not helping us because they don't want to.
Right.
Because they do want us off the land. They do want us to be eradicated, and they do want the land. That's what it was always about from the beginning. And he says the same thing in season 1 and in season 3. There's do you remember the clip I showed you where Monica helps solve an MMIW case?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't remember how much they showed of it in the clip, but there's an episode before where they talk about Sila, who's a missing woman on Yellowstone. She's unfortunately just introduced in this episode, and it is as a victim. But this episode it received a lot of praise. There are people saying, thank you for bringing this to light. We need to stop the violence and we need to search for our missing people. Another one said, Yellowstone touched a sensitive topic, which is missing Indigenous women. Hopefully it'll shed some light on this horrible issue. A lot of people were openly talking about it because, once again, Taylor Sheridan used his platform to bring this to the forefront. And in a show that is so Eurocentric, it's amazing that he was still able to do this.
I am curious, how many viewers are really paying attention to that, because the funny thing is, I was talking to some people at work who watch this show, and all the people I know that
people
watch
at
it
work watch this show.
Yeah, but they're all conservatives, and some pretty racist people that I work with that are fans of this show. So I'm curious.
Oh my God, I'm racist.
Like how much of I'm not saying everyone who watches the show is racist. It just happens to be
no,
those
but I
people
might be.
that I work
Is what
with.
I'm saying.
Well,
I need to
we all have a little racism because it's systematic.
That's true.
But like I'm really curious. Like how much of that message are they really are they realizing that it's not fiction? That's where I feel like a lot of people, especially white people, kind of get lost.
Dude.
They're like, this is so horrible. And the next day they're like, Trump 2020. You know what I mean? So it's, are they not realizing this is actually what happens? Are they that, hidden from the truth that they don't understand it? I don't know. Just a thought I had, when I was watching this.
No, but you're right. It is so funny you say that because like, while this stuff does start through the arts, I think a lot of people do separate art from reality. And there are some people who can't and are broken, which is me. Like everything, dude. I'll put my Terminator review up on the Patreon, but like, even when I was just stoned out of my mind watching the Terminator series and watching this movie, I was like, that was a really weird way to tackle immigration. Like, actually, wait, that's how a drunk person talks, not a high person. I don't know what I sound like when I'm high, but all the listeners of this podcast do.
Just listen to any episode.
But yeah, that's a really good point you bring up because like my wife likes it, and while she is not racist or problematic, like I have had to remind her, she's like, no, they're good people. I was like, these aren't good people. She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, the guy who starts a fight with Jimmy gets murdered. Like, he just starts a fight with a guy. Instead of just getting fired, they literally drive him to the top of a valley where 4 states pour all their garbage into, shoots him in the head and kills him. Like, that's what they do at Yellowstone. Like, they're all murderers. No matter how much you like John Dutton's resolve or you like how much of a badass Beth is, like, they all do bad things. And as the show progresses, this is kind of a spoiler, but Monica and Casey move on to the ranch to raise their kid. And it brings up a complicated question of Monica, is she now also a villain? Because while she may not be doing bad stuff, she is complicit. Like, she is aware that less than stellar things are going on in Montana and that the Yellowstone Ranch is at the center of a lot of it. So, do you just know that because you're at the epicenter, you're safe because, like you're protected by the most evil people in the valley, or it's a rough case. And like even Casey, like, he is always murdering people. He tries to do the right thing. I like that. I don't think that there are any wholly good or wholly bad people. Actually, real quick, can we talk about Monica's brother?
Yeah,
Casey's
sure.
former brother-in-law. Because what's interesting is they make him kind of the antithesis to Casey's actual brother, Lee, in the first episode. Like, he is very much like, natives first. We're not taking any shit from the white man. Like, he'll be the first to pull his rifle out as well. And he did some bad shit overseas as well. Like, he seems a little unhinged. And it's kind of complicated because I think the show makes you think that, you look at this guy and you're like, he's a fucking psycho. But is he? Like, is he really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, because, when the cattle get onto their property, he doesn't do anything until one of the white guys crosses over onto their land, and he's like, boom, like, puts him on the fucking ground and puts a rifle to his head.
Yeah, like, he won't start the fight, but he'll finish it.
Yeah, and then at the climax of the episode, when all the livestock agents are moving in for like a simultaneous, like, we're gonna take our cattle back, Casey's brother-in-law is there in the middle of the field waiting and fucking shooting at the helicopter of Casey's father, like John Dutton, like, and there's a bunch of dudes on the native side who have guns and are ready to go. Like, the whole police force, as small as it is, has shown out, and they're like, yo, don't come onto our land, don't do this shit. And yeah, there's a moment where Lee, he says like, oh, if you want them, come and take them. And sure enough, he gets shot by Casey's brother-in-law, and he's like, I'm taking him.
Yeah.
But like, he kind of has a right to be pissed about everything. Like, they're eating dinner at his house, and Casey's like, are you going to keep the cattle? And he's like, fuck you, dude. Like, of course we're keeping the cattle. Like, what are you talking about?
Grant, yeah, definitely. I mean, I wish we could have seen the brother's character a little more. It's a shame that he was gone so quickly from the show, but
Really?
yeah, there was some good tension in that first episode, that's for sure.
Yeah. So back to when there was this missing case in season 3. Basically, they don't have a lot of resources. They pull together a bunch of volunteers. Casey makes some calls. Monica makes some calls. At this point, she's teaching at the university, which we'll talk about in a bit as well. But she gets a few of her students, and she, alongside Rainwater, agrees to be a decoy because there's really no way to catch this guy or stop him. And of course, it's almost impossible to prosecute people. So Monica pretends that her car has broken down on the side of the road, and a guy picks her up and he attempts to kill her, and she has to run for her fucking life. And this guy's on top of her and he's choking her, and he's like, why can't you ever make it easy? Why do you always have to fight? And he gets fucking sniped in the head by one of my favorite characters. And this character, who, we still know so little about, but he's awesome whenever he's on screen. His name is Mo.
That's the actual actor's name, right?
I think it might be.
Yeah. I think he just listed as Rainwater's driver, but I think they started using his real name for the character too.
Yeah, because he goes from being Rainwater's driver to being basically his version of Rip. Like, he's his right-hand man, and he's the motherfucker who can get shit done. You'll see in the season 2 finale, they end up having to do kind of this, this raid, and so obviously Rip and Casey are there because they're fucking badasses and shit, and then Mo is also there with them. And it's awesome. And he's takes some lipstick or something, and he's putting symbols on his horse so the horse doesn't get shot. And then Rip's like, could you put any of that on me? He's like, nah. It's good. But yeah, it was really, I don't know, it was wild. It was graphic to see that in an episode. The episode is actually called I Killed a Man Today, because Monica takes responsibility for this guy dying.
Yeah, we should talk a little bit more about Monica, because I think she's arguably one of the best characters, if not the best character in the show, because she is a Native woman, right? She's with Casey of the Dutton family, and I feel like whenever I see her, she comes off as a very caring but intelligent and powerful woman, and her being willing to put herself in danger for this bust, to get this guy is a huge deal, right? Like that's a really big moment. And you showed me a couple clips with her that just shows the things that she experiences, the racism, the ignorance that she has to deal with, and yet she still comes out on top, and she proves that she is a strong person. So yeah, that scene in particular was brutal, and she obviously was very emotional for her. She's covered in blood and very shook up, but she helped catch him, and so he can't do it to someone else. And there was another episode, a clip that you sent me, where she's, I think, teaching a college class, right?
Yes, she starts teaching at a local university, and she's teaching a class. I think the class is about Christopher Columbus.
Right. Yeah. So when she walks in, someone's like, "Oh, are you the teacher's aide?" She's like, "No, I'm the teacher." And this bro guy's like, "I saw a Pornhub video that starts like this." And she shuts him down real fast. She starts talking about how, power can define someone's life, and how she has the power to fail him and kick him out of the class, to send him to the dean, to change his life forever. That's the kind of power she could exert on him at any moment. And she talks about Christopher Columbus and the horrible things, he said and did to the natives. And she has this really great quote that I wrote down. She says to her class, after reading this little excerpt by Columbus, she goes, "What you know of history is a dominant culture's justification of its actions, and I don't teach that. I'll teach you what happened to my people and to yours, because we're all the descendants of the subjugated, every one of us." And I thought that was
so
great.
Beautiful.
Yeah, obviously the natives have been heavily abused, have gotten the worst deal of all. But she's talking about class as well in this situation.
Absolutely,
not
she is,
class
yeah.
structure, not her class, but and she's discussing how these themes, the politics of it, the social status of it, everyone is subjugated. We have all been taken advantage of by the people more powerful than us. They've exerted their power and dominated every one of us, whether you're white, black, brown, native, whatever you might be. And she wants to teach them the truth of that. She wants them to see that. She's going to teach them true history and make them understand, how we've been taken advantage of there. And I thought that was great. I thought that was an awesome scene. I love that she's, right off the bat, she's making it known that she's not going to just be your this teacher who's just going to read the textbook to you. She's going to really get in there with them and make them understand reality, which I think we've talked about on the show is like something that's not really taught in school a lot.
Oh, yeah, we definitely have. And we've also covered that class struggle. And I thought that was great that she mentioned it as well. And, obviously you saw it the same way I did. But now it does beg the question, like those conservative people who love watching the show, like my wife's grandmother loves watching the show as well. But she's like, oh, Rip's a sexy cowboy. Yes, he is. There's a lot of sexy cowboys. Yeah. One of which is a black cowboy who wears an Africa necklace. He's actually a pretty cool character. They do okay with representation in this. But yeah, you do have to wonder if like the people who are watching it just because like there's white guys with guns who are cowboys and they know how to change a tire unlike these millennial cucks, or are they taking in like, okay, wow, like. Because at no point in the show do any of the white people question the natives. Like when they're like, "Oh, you stole our fucking land," John Dutton's like,
"Yeah, like that's not true." You get it. Like, I think you get that in real life more though, right? Like people will try to deny the truth, but in the show they're not. Everybody knows it's the truth. It's just a matter of like, well, fuck it, right? Like,
it kind of is what it is now. Monica has a lot of amazing moments. I do feel that what prompted her to help in that Indigenous women's case was that she kind of felt like a sellout, and she barely visits the reservation once she moves back onto the ranch, and she does. Yeah, it's rough. And I think that once she, it's like she talks to Casey, she's like, women are still dealing with all the stuff I had to deal with growing up. But I'm here sitting in a bathtub the size of a swimming pool. Like, she realized that by marrying into this family, she does have a certain amount of privilege now. Right. And, there are several moments in which, she has to decide, am I going to use this privilege to be an ally? There's also a moment where Beth uses her privilege to be, I want to say an ally, but also more kind of an anti-hero. There's a scene in which Monica is in a local boutique, and the woman who runs the boutique is accusing Monica of stealing, and obviously Monica denies having stolen anything, and so then the woman calls the cops in, and they end up doing this whole strip search, and she's like, what happened to innocent until proven guilty? And she's like, well, if you have nothing to hide, then you'll submit to the search. And it's kind of like, once again, just talking about the overreach of law enforcement, how just figuring out if you committed the crime can also be a punishment.
Yeah.
And
it's humiliating, right? Like it's taking away her dignity.
Oh yeah, and she gets into she has to go in the changing room, and then the woman is like, "Oh, I think I saw her sneak the ring down her pants." So now they do a strip search as well, and Beth comes in, and she's like, for a fact she didn't steal anything, and she basically calls out the cops, and they leave, and then she starts wrecking the shop to get back at this woman, starts breaking her down emotionally because of shit she did in high school, work she's had done to her. Like Beth is like, it seems like she's obviously problematic because of how she emasculates Jamie all the time and says homophobic, derogatory things at him. But I also think that she just knows how to get to you. And she knows that Jamie's lack of masculinity, he wanted to be a rancher, his father wanted him to be a lawyer, is one of his insecurities. And she goes in on this woman's insecurities. She starts making her undress. Like, she actually does terrible stuff. And Monica's like, doing this to her doesn't undo what she did to me. And Monica's like, whatever, I'm leaving now. And she just tells the woman, she's like, just tell me you judged me because of the color of my skin. And she's like, I did. I saw your skin. And she was like, okay. There's also a moment where they empty out her bag and there's a U.S. history textbook. And she's like, oh, you guys want to keep that? You should.
Nice. Have you seen Sons of Anarchy?
So I saw Similar. I've seen as much Sons of Anarchy as you've seen of Yellowstone.
Okay, all
believe it or
right.
not.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
similar dynamics in terms of the main characters and like the family aspect. Like Jax Teller from that is very much like Casey in this. Like he wants to stay away from the family, but he keeps getting dragged back in. And his wife Tara is very much like Monica. Like she understands like the power dynamics of the family. It's just interesting to me. It kind of hit me that there's a lot of similarities there.
I'm gonna have to look into it because I know that you were into Sons of Anarchy for a bit. I watched a few episodes and obviously there's a connection. Have you seen The Mayans at all or no?
Not yet. It's on my list.
I mean, I don't know if we've discussed it before, but like a lot of people don't realize that like South Americans are natives.
Yes.
Like they are, and just instead of being fucking colonized by the English, they were colonized by the Spanish.
Yep.
And that they do have very strong connections to their native culture. And of course, unfortunately, after fighting off the Spanish, they ended up having to fight the Mexican-American War, in which a bunch of more of their land was taken. And it's like constantly a cruel joke that the United States is telling them to go back to where they came from, despite the fact that our land is where they came from.
Yep.
One of the big themes that I surmised myself is that just for being a native person in general, existence is resistance. Like Rainwater brings it up several times how that any time they could just assimilate and there will be no more reservations, but that's not the case. He's like we're gonna get the land back. He's like, and we're gonna buy it with their money because once again he's got that Harvard degree, he's got that business degree, he's opening up casinos left and right. Like he's in it to win it, playing their game to beat them, which is also in itself a form of resistance. I also want to note how after Monica gets saved by Beth, Beth invites her to go out for a drink. Beth is an alcoholic, also like Cersei. And, Monica says that she doesn't drink. This goes into what we were talking about, alcoholism and substance abuse issues on reservations, because she says that alcohol is illegal on reservations. So there's something called ocean water, which is Lysol and water. And they drink that in order to get drunk. And, this at this point, Monica has a physical therapist because of an accident she's in. Did you see any of the season 2 ones or no?
No. All I saw was that clip from the classroom.
But yeah, so the guy who's helping her through her injury, which she sustains while being a teacher on the reservation. I didn't actually have time to look into it, but I'll look into it and put in the show notes and just see how much funding education is able to receive on reservations as well. Because, like that one guy said, any problem that we have here gets multiplied by 5 when it hits reservation. So, but yeah, her physical therapist is telling her, like, listen, if you only show them the tragedy, if you only teach tragedy, they'll see us as tragic. So she does make an effort to bring her class to the horse relays, the manhood ritual and everything, which we actually talked about in the Watchmen episode, the lessons in Comanche horsemanship, and she also brings her class to a rap show on the reservation, which is pretty awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like the douche kid from her class, like he's reading the ticket collector's shirt, and she thinks he's looking at her tits, and it says like ask me why I stand or something like that, because they're talking about I think it's a relative to talking about Standing Rock and stuff like that. They're standing up for their land.
Okay.
And and she's like, she says something to him and calls him like a motherfucker, and he's like talking to Monica. He's like, "Am I safe here?" And she's like, "You're safe. Don't worry." There's people freestyling wearing Make America Great Again hats, except it says Make America Native Again.
Nice.
She's listening to one of the songs. Like, it's awesome. I did a little project in college about talking about how rap has infiltrated so many different parts of the world and has been used as a form of resistance, rap and hip hop, the spoken word. And, it's also right here at home where you have people on native native land, who are also speaking truth to power and talking about their experiences using their rap lyrics. And Monica actually cries during that part too, because I think she feels like a sellout, honestly, because as sweet of a character as she is, she still does benefit from a lot of privilege just by marrying into the Dutton family. So I do think that there are multiple times when she feels kind of like she's forsaken her own people.
Wow. Do they go into blood quantum at all in the show?
I'm not even sure I know what it is. Tell me.
So blood quantum is basically a way that was designed to measure the amount of Native American blood that someone has. And it's highly controversial because it can affect your identity, your relationship, and whether or not you or your children are considered a member of a tribe. Because certain tribes have a percentage of blood that you need to have. So, for example, the Navajo Nation requires a minimum of 25% Navajo blood. So if you have 21%, you cannot be a member of the Navajo tribe, which then means you don't get any of the supposed benefits to being a Native American for, college or anything like that. So it's a way of taking away people's identity, because they were children forced from their parents' hands, and then, they wound up marrying someone who's not Native, and the blood gets more and more diluted. So it's a really controversial way of basically taking away land from people and controlling natives is another method right there. So it's pretty brutal. I do have an article that I we can put in the show notes about it. I was curious if they brought that up at all, because I know that's always a common way of keeping Native people down, and loopholes and ways to prevent them from taking what is theirs or what they supposedly own. So blood quantum simply is the amount of Indian blood that an individual possesses. The federal government, and specifically the Department of the Interior, issues what is called a certified degree of Indian blood. That is a card similar to an ID card. So the way that blood quantum is calculated is by using tribal documents, and usually it's a tribal official or a government official that calculates it. But really, it's a mathematical equation. So the quantum is a fraction of blood that is derived going back to the original enrollees of a tribe who were counted on census rolls. And then their blood quantum was documented, and usually those original enrollees had a full blood quantum typically. So, wow. It's pretty wild.
So I was going to ask, but I think you answered my question already. The individuals who come up with this, the powers that be who come up with this rule are the federal government.
Yes, the government. The government came up with it.
Because I was going to be like, why would the Navajo exclude people for 4% difference? But of course, it's like you said, it's clearly meant as a gatekeeping tool, so that way the government doesn't have to administer benefits to people who really need it.
Exactly.
25%. And you know what's so fucked up, dude? It's always been up to them to choose how much of a certain percentage of a person you are, like what your ethnicity is, what your identity is, like it's they did the brown paper bag test was used to determine how black somebody was. They had the 1 drop rule, they had the grandfather clause, they had I just found out the other day talking about like tests to prove someone's ethnicity and stuff. There used to be a pencil test, dude. That
really?
Legit, if somebody could drop a pencil through your hair, you were considered white, but if it got stuck, you would be considered black.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm not shocked, but
I know. So I technically would be considered black because it would definitely get caught in my hair.
Wow.
And and that's something that I've been coming to terms with myself, just as far as my identity goes. I'm not sure how much I've spoken about it, but my father did not want me to be anything other than white growing up. He, I think, was very ashamed of his Dominican heritage. He, was always with white women, always had white friends, did everything he could to make sure he didn't have an accent because it was all about being accepted and assimilating. Much like Rainwater mentions. And, because of that, I never really got to learn about myself. And, I don't, all he ever did was put hair gel in my hair. I never knew, what's good for my hair as far as product goes, because I actually, now in the past few years, I've learned to love my curls. And, just learning about that was very shocking to me. Apparently they also used to plot out escape maps to freedom in cornrows on people's hair.
Wow.
Yeah. So like there's like a strong cultural heritage that goes back to everything. And
Yeah.
so like people don't realize when it comes to appropriating culture that they're like, oh, it's just a funny thing, like I made dreads or something,
Yeah.
or like I put on this funny hat or whatever. It's like, yo, these were like legit what people had to do in order to survive at a certain point. Like, yes, your appropriation is is traumatizing.
Yeah,
at the very
people, they
least.
don't get that. But this blood quantum thing, the craziest thing I think about it is that each tribe gets to determine the percentage that someone can be to be in their tribe. So it's kind of like a catch-22 of, why would you set it at 25% knowing that the government has set this blood quantum, But I guess it's also a way of preserving that, some jackass who has, 1% doesn't come in and reap the benefits of, something that belongs to someone who's actually native. So it's a tough spot, it's tough for everyone involved, I think, to really figure out what the best way of handling that is.
Yeah, and I'm sure it also comes down to numbers as everything does, right? Like,
Yeah.
They probably give you a certain budget. They're like, all right, you have this much in year for benefits for your people.
Yeah.
How many people are going to be getting it? So it's like, okay, now maybe we got to keep that 25% in order, for us to make it.
You gotta make hard choices.
I also want to note that the woman in that boutique that was harassing Monica was wearing like a bunch of turquoise. There was so much like native stuff around that had been taken by the white people and appropriated into their culture. I mean, a lot of things are appropriated. Like, people don't realize that the whole reason cowboys exist is because it comes from Mexico. The term was originally vaquero, which, means cowman. Vaca is cow. So they were vaqueros, and, because literally they would lead cattle like across the plains. They were literal cowboys, and like that was a Mexican term that was taken and appropriated by white men who would do the same job.
Wow.
So, yeah. Basically, like, at a certain point or another, everything has been stolen. I'm not trying to make white people feel fucking guilty, but just when you talk about history, realize that shit.
I think just acknowledging it, right? Like, we just have to acknowledge it, because I think white people are always so defensive about it. And they're like, well, I didn't do it. And it's like, we're not saying you did, but you have to acknowledge that these people are in a worse off position because it happened to them. If we just dismiss that, and we just pretend like it never happened, then you can never really move on from it. You can never learn from it. So I think we have to acknowledge these horrible things happen in order to help these people heal and actually find some sort of equality.
Because the only way to reach true equality is through equity. And that's it. Based on, 400 years of unpaid labor that African slaves had to go through, based on all of the terrible atrocities suffered by Native people, like, historically, like, these are all reasons why those communities are kind of left behind, and why those who are successful from those communities are the exception. Whereas if you're white, it's normally like expected of you, like, oh, there's another white billionaire. Of course there's another white billionaire. What the fuck else would he be?
Yeah.
Like, it's expected for you to be successful and achieve greatness. So
Yeah.
I don't know, just something to keep in mind there.
I do have a cool little thing that happened for some Indigenous folks in Nova Scotia. A pretty big victory for them, if you don't mind. I'm just going to bring it up real quick. Recently there's been some attacks on fishermen. I'm not going to even try to say the tribe's name because I want to butcher it, and that's really upsetting, so I don't want to do that to them. But there's a first...
Or you'll fillet it.
Ooh,
it's fish.
Nice. That was good. Well done.
Sorry.
So the First Nation there, they are allowed to basically fish for lobster outside of the designated season, because I guess there's less Indigenous fishermen than there are commercial fishermen, and because it's important to their survival. But a lot of commercial fishermen in the area are greatly opposing that, right? So they actually have been harassing this First Nation horribly, cutting their fishing lines, attacking their boats. They actually came in a mob and attacked one of their facilities. The police did nothing.
Christ, man. Of course they did.
It was really horrible, and they were getting really terrified. And it was actually preventing them from surviving in a way. They weren't able to do what was so important to them. But they actually that First Nation just bought Clearwater, Atlantic Canada's largest seafood firm. So they went ahead.
Fuck yeah.
It's worth $1 billion, and they pooled their money and they did a joint venture to actually purchase it, so that now not only will they be able to fish, but they own one of the largest, fishing companies there. So these commercial fishermen, many of them may be even working for them now at this point. So it's a pretty historic victory, and it's pretty exciting for them, because you don't see this happen too often, right? We were just talking about how much Native people have lost and how they never really get anything back. And look, they're doing this, they're doing it legally, and it's a big fuck you to everybody who didn't want them to do what, how they survive. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I wanted to bring that up as a little hopeful message.
That's awesome. Because like that guy said, if you only teach tragedy, they'll see us as tragic.
That's right.
Also he does follow that up with saying, show them what we're fighting for.
Yeah.
Like what we're fighting to preserve. So yeah, that's awesome to hear. Finally a win. I also want to bring up one last part. There are a bunch of awesome moments that I have in the show notes. So definitely check those out, guys. We weren't able to get through everything, but it is a lot when you're like reviewing a show. There's so much to cover.
It's 3 seasons, and we're really focusing on natives this month. So
yeah,
while there's probably some other great moments throughout the show about the Duttons and other characters, I think we did a good job focusing on native aspects of the show.
But there is that moment where Monica brings her class to the horse. Well, it's not necessarily the actual horsemanship ritual. It's like practice. But one of her students turns to her and she's like, "What does this have to do with Columbus?" And she's like, "Absolutely nothing. But look at all you've learned."
Nice.
And that was really beautiful, because it just kind of showed me that stripping the oppressor from the narrative, it shows what has always been erased or what's been hidden, because that's what the oppressor was there to do, to erase and hide things.
Why learn about Columbus when we can learn about the people that live there, right? And their practices and what was taken from them, because that's probably a lot more rich and fulfilling than what we've learned about Columbus and his horrible fucking acts of violence. So
yes. And they don't make a point to bring it up, but after that one kid is shot by a livestock agent, there's like a full-scale investigation, and compared to how they handle all the stuff that happens on the res, it's like a very clear contrast. They don't mention it verbally, but I think it does show a lot that they're putting all these resources into finding out why a white kid was shot, and they don't care about the natives at all. The media is used by Rainwater, though, because once again he uses the white man's tactics. So at the end of the first episode where there was that shootout on his land, there are a couple of native bodies, and he smiles. And he's ready to use that media attention to his advantage. And, I guess just talking about media attention, it's important that we do see these things in our media. It's important that we are made aware of these, because even, for as... let's say it's a show that definitely does attract a conservative base because of the content that's in it. But for me, like being like, all right, what the fuck is my fiance gonna make me watch now? Because that's who she was at the time. I was like, holy shit, like look at this. Like it's definitely, just like you said, Pocahontas was, right? Like Pocahontas was made to cater to a white audience. And I think that Yellowstone definitely was as well. I do think that they do make it they do a pretty good job of putting in native issues and bringing attention to them, and hopefully more people than just myself, recognize that.
Yeah, he's clearly making the Duttons the villains, right? The Duttons are kind of the villainous characters, even if they are the protagonists. So I think it was very intentional to show this and show what native people suffer on the res and how they've been mistreated, even to this day, when people want to say racism doesn't exist, right? And you can look at this and see that that's very, very much not true.
Yeah, and that, this isn't just a TV show. This is literally based off of real experiences. And, obviously, that's why we do this fucking podcast in the first place. Like everything we talk about, we relate to real world stuff. So yeah, it is definitely one of my favorites. It is cool to go back and rewatch stuff because I can't give you the specific characters, but we also find out later on that not only is law enforcement lacking, not only is education lacking, not only are resources for poverty lacking, but they have an area on the reservation where you can get an abortion, but the only way that they can do it because they're limited resources is to give you a hysterectomy, which means that they take out the woman's uterus and she can never bear children again.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so that was also a quick thing they threw in there. They didn't even make the whole episode about that. But
it's in there.
What happened, yes, but that abortion or hysterectomy, whatever, it doesn't happen to a Native woman.
Oh.
It happens to a white woman, and when you see it, you'd be like, oh, fuck. Like, it's interesting to see that Native problems also are impacting white people in different ways. Casey being on the reservation in the first couple episodes, that character having to go and get a procedure done, and lots of other stuff. But yeah, hopefully you've been able to enjoy me telling my friend about a show I like, the podcast, and the friend having watched some of it. Friend, do you think that you will continue Yellowstone at some point?
Yeah, I definitely plan on at least finishing the first season, and if I'm still enjoying it, I'll probably keep going. It's intriguing. I'm curious to see where it goes next.
Yeah, like I said, if the first season is definitely great. I think the climax is a little lackluster. Season climax of season 2, the finale, is a lot better, and and season 3 definitely has its moments. I wouldn't say that any of them are bad. There is a lot of stock markets and real estate. Like there's a lot of that talk.
Right.
But if you were able to get through all the we can call the banners of this house, and the North will never stand behind you. Like all that shit, you could get behind that with all the Game of Thrones. You could definitely sit through, Beth being like, they're not going to take our land no matter what. Smokes cigarette, drinks whiskey.
Yep. Hey, quick question are there hospitals on reservations? Because when they called 911, it took 45 minutes for that ambulance to get there.
In which case?
When that meth lab blew up.
Oh, when the meth lab blew up. Yeah, so I kind of forgot about that episode. There was actually a child who was believed to have had only a cold, but 12 hours later he was struggling to breathe. His mother rushed her to a hospital in western South Dakota where the doctors said they didn't have the capacity to treat him and transferred him to a private hospital in Rapid City. And there he was actually given a life-threatening diagnosis of respiratory syncytial virus.
Whoa.
And she said, they told me if I hadn't brought him back in, he would have died. And, it said that he was lucky to have survived that day. But the problems at Susan, which is one of 24 hospitals nationwide run by the Indian Health Service, an arm of the Department of Health and Human Services, are pervasive. 5 government investigations have found that the patients have died at Susan from inadequate care or are often given wrong diagnoses and are treated by staff members who have not been screened for hepatitis and tuberculosis. So to answer your question, yes, there are hospitals on reservations, but they are few and far between. And once again, just like everything else, not given the resources. So you can imagine, when I looked up that thing, one of the first results that came up was the COVID was a COVID notice regarding Indian reservations.
Interesting.
So
wow.
So yeah, I mean, this is rough, comrades. That what we got to do is when we get our commune together, which is going to be all of us just pooling all of our money, buying a piece of land, bringing our different talents to it. We're going to see if how much of that money we can. Maybe we'll move in right next to a reservation and then help build each other. Who knows?
Nice. I like that.
I don't know, but honestly, dude, I think I don't know, the resistance kind of has to start. The revolution has to start with them as well. They were the first. They were the first victims of a Eurocentric capitalist system that our entire country, in the failing late stages of capitalism, is run after. We are running based on a terrible system that should have evolved by now, and it hasn't. And we never gave an original system on North America's continent time to flourish. So,
yeah.
But yeah. And, you know, like I said to you off mic, the small part of you that probably still likes all those cool, like, you know, badasses wielding guns and running in to save people, like, you know, that is very much a part of the Yellowstone show. You know, for multiple reasons. It's been one of my favorites, and I hope that it continues to do. I do want it to do more native related stuff, just because, like, especially now, that's just the story I'm more interested in.
Right. Same.
You know, because I don't care about the guy losing his land when, you know,
it wasn't his land anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. He says when they have to go to a meeting or something because they're gonna do some sketchy shit. I think this is season 2 toward the finale. It's Rainwater, that fuck Jenkins, and Dutton, and they're all meeting on the Yellowstone Ranch, and he's talking to Mo while he waits for John, and he says, like, you know, like, not too long ago, our ancestors were here. They hunted this land. They camped this land. They slept here. They slept under the stars. Like, until one day, John Dutton's great-great-grandfather decided to build on this land and say it was his. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, so it is something that's always there. It's like, it's always in the forefront. Like we said, your race is a part of your identity, whether you want to admit it or not. You know, he also, during that meeting at the very end, he says like this has to be kept quiet, because if a livestock commissioner breaks the law, it's not going to change the way the whole world views livestock commissioners. He's like, if I'm found breaking the law, then it'll destroy my people. Everyone's gonna start, you know, looking into reservations and you know, and holding their leaders to different standards and thinking they're all criminals and stuff. Like,
man,
you know, so as powerful as somebody like Rainwater is, he still does have a lot on the line just as a Native man, you know, as much as John Dutton does, but 5 times more, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that.
Yeah.
Let's say that.
Wow.
Ty, do you know what we're reviewing next week?
I believe we're going to be doing Even the Rain.
That's right. Okay, so listen, Politipop heads, tune in next week for Even the Rain.
The final part of our Indigenous Spotlight Month, right?
It is. Indigenous Spotlight Month. That's such a good way to describe it. I should have called it that from the beginning. I'm like hashtagging like Indigenous Peoples Awareness Month, Happy Indigenous Day, which is a day, you know. But yeah, and you know, it'll probably be a good follow-up to Pocahontas and Yellowstone.
I think so.
You know, to definitely have a native-centric cast again. But you know, I definitely enjoy talking about one of my favorite shows with you, and you know, a socially aware show at that, especially today, I think is a very bold statement.
Yeah, and it finally got me to watch it, so it was good.
There you go. I honestly, this is probably selfish of me, but I was like, this is the only way I'm gonna fucking get him to watch this show.
Son of a bitch,
it's the only way. And even then, what was it? 4 episodes of season 1?
Yeah, listen, that's pretty good, man.
That is pretty good, especially for you. I was a little disappointed because I was like, no, you got to watch those specific episodes. But you're like, oh, I might actually watch the show. I'm like, fuck. So he doesn't want to spoil shit. God damn it. So, but we'll definitely check in and do Yellowstone updates.
We will. That'll be fun.
Let y'all know on the Patreon. Remember, our Patreon link is going to be in the show notes and sources as well. We have $3, $6, and $9 tiers with a bunch of different and very fun benefits. So definitely get on that. Give us support.
Check it out.
Yep, you can listen to us and rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I mean it. If you're not able to find us on one of your podcatchers of choice, let me know, and I'll get us there. You can find us on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe to our video, like our videos, subscribe to our channel. You can find us on Twitter at PolitiPopPod, Instagram at PolitiPopPodcast, email us at PolitiPopcast@gmail.com, and find our show notes and sources at PolitiPopPodcast.wordpress.com. Special thanks to all of you listeners and to Antonia Chava for logo design. For the Politipop Podcast, I have been Mike Booch, a.k.a. I'm doing one at the end.
Ooh.
A.k.a. Chairman Bongwater.
And I've been Ty.
Remember, no matter what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're listening to, no matter what you're doing to learn about Indigenous people this month, because please do, never stop thinking, never stop learning, and always remember to read between the lines.
And scene.
All right.